Hello, I have perfected Helldivers 2 on Steam by collecting all 38 achievements. This includes completing over 100 missions, murdering over 5,000 enemies, extracting after the time reaches 0, and a lot more we'll touch on a bit later. Welcome to my full review. Helldivers 2 is a third-person, squad-based shooter being developed by Arrowhead Game Studios and published by Sony Entertainment. You can find the game on Steam or the PlayStation Network. Starting off with the settings, it is visually appealing with its gray and yellow theme. However, it starts with motion blur and mouse smoothing enabled. The camera shake strength starts off on medium, which feels more like high, so if you suffer from motion sickness, keep this in mind. The mouse sensitivity is a bit weird. You have a decimal range from 0 to 10.0, which is great, however the scaling is horrible. 1 and above is insanely fast, rendering the extra 9 options useless, unless you're using an extremely low DPI, which I doubt you are. If you prefer a specific decibel number, you're not allowed to type it in, so you're now struggling to get your preferred sense. As for the technical side of things, I'm going to start by not mentioning any of the server-related issues, as that is to be expected and it'd be unfair. Also note, I'm running this off a low high-end PC, so how this runs for me might not run the same for you. However, the game currently suffers from a memory leak issue, which will eventually crash your game if you're playing hours on end without rebooting from time to time. Speaking of crashes, there are a lot of weird encounters that causes them. I've crashed randomly changing my gear, hugging a teammate, and simply getting hit by an enemy. I've only crashed a handful of times, and they aren't consistent enough to warrant a future purchase, just a little annoying when it does happen. The keybinds are a bit janky to learn at first, however easy to adapt after a couple matches. There are obviously a lot of bugs in Helldivers, however the main ones I encountered that frustrated me are as follows. Doing a full reload for it to provide a single shot, forcing you to reload again for the full mag. If you're too close to a bug's nest when it closes, or you're spawned on top of it, you'll be sucked into the world and your only way out is death. Speaking of spawns, when being dropped into the world, you can usually guide yourself away from teammates or threats, however it will just randomly stop working, and you're forced to land exactly where it wants you to. Sometimes this will end in death. Aside from those few things, I ran the game perfectly fine with no other issues. The entire experience felt amazing, nothing I said was a deal breaker, and I still kept playing. Moving on to the difficulty, there are currently 9 different stages, most of which are required to play through for progression. Each level unlocks by completing an entire mission on the previous level. They're separated into tiers based on difficulty alongside the resources they can provide. The higher the difficulty, the more resources are able to be gathered, all while throwing more unique enemies and objectives at you. Levels 1 to 3 will provide common samples, levels 4 to 6 will provide common and rare samples, and levels 7 through 9 will provide common, rare, and super samples, all of which are required to upgrade your ship to provide greater cooldowns and buffs to your war efforts. As for the replayability, it is quite literally endless and no 2 missions ever play out the same way. The universe will constantly be expanded upon once the main issues are resolved. Moving on to the gameplay section of the review. In short, Helldivers 2 is a never-ending galactic war where it relies on the entire player base to defend and attack planets from separate galactic races, all while trying to defend your own Super Earth. You can play solo or have up to 4 people in a party. You start the game after a quick cutscene and being thrown into the tutorial. This entire section takes around 10 minutes if we round up and goes over most of the things you'll need to know from the controls down to the basics of the game. Your instructor cracks some jokes until you prove yourself enough to become a Helldiver by collecting your cape. I say most as there are a lot of mechanics not explained in the tutorial you will have to figure out, such as pressing middle mouse will change perspectives, holding down reload will provide weapon customization to the weapon you're holding, you can ping with Q and holding it down will provide a communications wheel, containers can be opened by exploding them, you can stim your teammates when they're low, and so much more. This game has an incredible amount of depth, and if you're struggling, it's most likely a knowledge gap. Anyway, there are currently only 2 races in the game, the Automatrons, who you can tell by the name are most likely robots, and the Terminoids, who, you guessed it, are bugs. Though I'm sure more will come with time, as not even half the map is covered yet. I would eventually like to see a mixed up war between all the races, and by the looks of it, it's not impossible. As you level up, you'll be able to unlock more stratagems, which are the weapons and utility of the game. You're allowed to carry 4 alongside 1 booster, which is a passive given to your entire squad. You'll most likely spawn in weapons or backpacks the moment you land, while the remaining will be used on objectives. Now I want to touch on the things I truly love first, and the top one for me has to be the double crosshair. They have a stationary one for the center of your screen to help you aim, while the secondary circle is where your bullets will be traveling. Depending on the weapon, you will gain a great sense of weight on how heavy or light the guns you're using actually are, and where you should be aiming the recoil. This mechanic alone was insanely well done. While being a mostly third-person shooter, you'll also have the option to go first person person while aiming down sights. There are some weapons where the first person is honestly preferred or benefits you in unique ways. For example, you can turn the safety off on the railgun, and while in first person, you can easily see the overcharge of the gun. If you go too far, you will explode. To change your perspective on PC, by default, you need to press in your scroll wheel, which usually I absolutely hate. However, it feels extremely natural here. One of the small details a lot of games usually struggle with is fabric. However, Helldivers somehow managed almost flawless cape physics with very little clipping. You can go out of your way to force it, but it is insanely impressive and had me dazed for quite a while. Just like the attention to detail with the weather designs and gore splatters. Microtransactions were bound to be brought up in this review somewhere. However, I like the way they're implemented here. Let me explain. Super credits are what they call the premium currency. It is currently only used to purchase extra outfits or the premium battle pass. The outfits usually are two separate chest pieces with their respective helm. Helmets are currently purely cosmetic, however armor sets provide actual stats with its visuals. Now I'm fairly certain any stat thrown into the store's armor is freely obtained within the free battle pass, just with a different visual cosmetic. You may think that is pay to win, I see it more as pay for fashion. With that being said, here's the kicker. Super credits can be obtained in-game on any mission you load into. They're usually hidden inside a point of interest you'll need to open or blow up. I obtained enough credits in-game to purchase the premium battle pass, which costs 1,000 super credits, or around 15 Canadian dollars, without spending a penny before I was even a third of the way done the free pass. You can easily farm the premium currency without hassle, rendering FOMO and the pay-to-win mindset to rest. If I'm required to deal with microtransactions in any game, this is a perfect example of how to incorporate them. Now let's talk about the stuff I don't like. There are a lot of small things that can constantly go wrong, and once they start repeating multiple times over, they become extremely infuriating and to the point of anger. Diving is a wonderful mechanic and quite required if you want to avoid damage or explosions your party accidentally throws at you. However, the animation of diving stops you from reloading your gun or even healing yourself. Tie that to the enemies physically blocking you, ganging up and quickly murdering you, or getting slammed into mid-dive. You are stuck in a limbo where you cannot do anything but spam keys that do nothing and die. There are many other small things that can get you killed without it ever being your fault, such as sprinting, as it can force you to climb over useless obstacles while sometimes not even being near them. Thank you, Void. While I love the attention to detail and realism provided with it, I've fallen too many times to a stim refusing to pop because something slightly touched me or my character does something I didn't want them to. Speaking of vaulting, it reminded me that climbing is also terrible. Certain planets have a lot of verticality where it benefits you to climb. However, you're not allowed to climb up things you very clearly could lift your leg up and over. A lot of rocks that look climbable are just simply not. I've gotten stuck in a few places because I fell in or got launched between a place a little too high to climb, rendering my life now useless. The weapon balancing is not the best. Now I'm not saying there is a set in stone meta, as you can truly use anything for whatever scenario you're throwing yourself into, but there is a very clear difference in what stratagems you should avoid and which you should always have. You can truly play the game however you want, and that is the beauty of it. However, the higher difficulty pub matches are already full of people ready to kick or throw your game for not running the obvious ones. The final dislike I'll go over is a lot of the outfits are just not that visually appealing to me. Now there are cosmetics I love the looks of, like the sniper outfit on page 7 or this movie look-alike, but I don't know, a lot don't sit right with me, so I tend to just use what looks the best and not change, which is not always a viable thing to do here. Now I have never played a Helldivers game, and if I'm being completely honest, I had little to no interest going in. With the trailer and content I saw prior, I couldn't grasp the hype past the curiosity of how it played. I was graciously given a key to play with friends, and within a few hours I completely understood. My opinion quickly changed the more I played, and I'm grateful Comment was by my side the entire way. As for the world of Helldivers, it is to no surprise to anyone that the game is visually gorgeous, even with it being built on a heavily modded, non-existent 2018 engine called Stingray. The attention to detail here is quite literally insane. Now the world itself is massive, being separated by multiple planets, each having their own objectives and maps tied to it. They're all fairly unique, however the more you play you'll quickly notice every objective and place of interest is visually the same, with little to no variation outside of the placement and map terrain within. While you progress through the difficulties, the worlds will become larger and provide more bonus objectives to look out for. However, with so much being the same, it can start to wear you down slowly once you've experienced it all. The distinct maps and terrain constantly changing can only carry so much. Your main goal aside from the objective you're throwing yourself into is to collect as many samples as possible while on a time crunch. You'll mostly find samples inside objectives, however they can be scattered around main ones or any point of interest. The wonderful thing about Helldivers is that no two missions ever play out the same way, and there is always something to learn. The gameplay goes a lot deeper than most may think, and everything has an intended purpose. I thought smokes were pretty useless until I learned how wrong I actually was. Now for the audio, I don't have one bad thing to say. They did an amazing job around the entire board. The music is a nice bop, you'll listen to the same ending song over and over again and it never gets annoying to listen to. They did everything they could to try and keep you immersed into the world and it shows wonderfully. Hey, you made it to the story section and my thoughts on it. I won't be covering the spoilers in depth, but if you would like to avoid them, skip ahead to the positive and negative section below. Ready? Okay, this game takes place a century after the events of the first game, with Super Earth having emerged victorious against the adversaries. In a shocking turn of events, the Terminoids have broken free of their farms and began spreading throughout the galaxy. Super Earth has no choice but to mobilize the Helldivers once again to stop them and other various threats. As a Helldiver, you battle the foes of Super Earth by not only changing the face of the galaxy, but the course of its history. You do this by completing global, time-sensitive orders to achieve large-scale goals and the outcome of which will shape the story going forward, meaning the story is not something that happens to players, but something the players themselves have to actively make happen. We as the player base hold the entire story at our fingertips, and I think that is a very cool concept to be taken literally. As mentioned before, I have never played the first game, which thankfully doesn't matter in this case, but going into this story extremely blind, there isn't much to grab onto outside of the obvious. There are little droplets of lore scattered throughout the entire game and the planets you're exploring. Each map you visit will have an opportunity to uncover pieces of information usually placed alongside a point of interest. I don't have the time nor am I invested enough to put them all together to understand what is going on a deeper level. However, if you care about the lore of Helldivers, I'm quite positive it goes a lot deeper than even I can imagine. I'm also quite certain there will be a lot more of it over time, so just keep your eye peeled, and I'm sure many other content creators will be covering this story. As mentioned before, there are a total of 38 achievements, all of which took me 65 hours to obtain. I will not be mentioning the ones handed to you just by playing. However, let's start with let's call it a draw. Well, you'll need to shoot off both arms on a Hulk and extract while it's alive. This achievement is kind of messed up, but it's pretty easy to obtain. Hold My Liver T is where you must knock yourself into a ragdoll state while using a jump pack. This one was weird to figure out, as I tried almost everything until my friend told me to jump on the exploding spores with it, and it worked wonders. Helldive is to complete an extreme difficulty mission without anyone in the group dying. This felt impossible with pubs, however becoming over-equipped and running with a friend group makes it a whole lot better. Now the hardest achievement award goes to Gone in 360 seconds. Where you must complete a full blitz mission on extreme and extract in under 6 minutes. This achievement felt like it came down to the luck of the draw on fair mob spawns alongside the planet. This took the most amount of tries but felt amazing to accomplish as a group. Doing your part is to complete at least 100 missions. This was the final achievement I unlocked because it refused to pop for me. I thought it was going to be an unattainable achievement, however it took me around 110 missions before it decided to randomly count while I was on my ship. Now let's go over some of the positives. The combat and progression systems are much deeper than you'd expect. The game is very easy to obtain and extremely difficult to put down. It has a satirical tone that never fails to provide a chuckle. Global progress in the galactic war that makes you feel like you're always doing your part. And a potentially never-ending co-op title you can always come back to for a good time. As for the negatives, it is not a fun single-player experience. If you don't want to join public lobbies for the more difficult objectives, you're going to have an insanely rough time without some friends. There are a lot of small annoyances that will hopefully be fixed over time, or will forever drive our insanity to what we call democracy. Higher difficulty matches can take up a lot of time if you're pushing for objectives, so if you don't have around an hour to throw away for one mission, you might struggle a little bit. In conclusion, Helldivers 2 is a great example of how thirsty we all are for really good cooperative titles. And they absolutely nailed it. If you are debating like I was, I promise taking the leap to give it a try will be nothing but a good time. I'm excited to see what the future holds for updates and the Galactic War. I think it's very obvious, but I heavily recommend the game even with its current flaws. It's fairly priced for what it is, and you will absolutely get your time from it. However, that will conclude my Helldivers 2 review. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. Let me know what you thought down below, or what game I should complete next. A huge thanks to Aura for the gift, as this review would not have been made without her. Subscribe so you never miss a video. And until next time, take care.